Welcome, everyone, to today's featured panel. For anyone who I haven't met, my name is Rich Frazee. I work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the Center of Teaching and Learning Mentoring, and I'm honored, just honored to be this year's conference chair. We are really privileged to hear from another of people from different institutions across the country to have a discussion. Um, just so you know, we'll have discussion. I'll be having some leading questions. Attendees are welcome to use the chat feature if you have questions that you'd like to have the panel. Again, as I lead the conversation, we may be able to get to some, we may not be able to. At the very least, we'll be happy to find ways to follow up. But that's the format. And at this point, I would just like to introduce each of our panel participants before we begin our conversation. Again, it's celebrating distance education. First, Dr. Aisha Haynes is the Assistant Director at the Center for Teaching and Excellence, CTE, at the University of South Carolina, Columbia. She oversees the CTE's instructional design services. Dr. Haynes is a certified quality manners peer and master reviewer and has earned online teaching certifications from the Online Learning Consortium. She has been designing online courses for more than 10 years. Dr. Haynes teaches in online computer applications and business for Palmetto College. She also teaches graduate level courses for the Curriculum and Instruction Curriculum Studies program in the College of Education at U of SC Columbia. Her research interests include instructional design in online learning environments, online course accessibility, universal design for learning, and collaboration and engagement in online learning environments. Dr. Haynes is the current president of the Association for Distance Education and Independent Learning. And in 2014, Dr. Haynes established the Dr. Aisha S. Haynes Endowed Scholarship Fund. The scholarship is awarded to first-generation, low-income college students in TRIO programs, Opportunity Scholars programs, at the University of South Carolina, Columbia. More specifically, the scholarship is awarded to rising seniors who have at least a 3.0 GPA and who have shown exemplary university or community service. Please join me in introducing or welcoming Dr. Aisha Haynes. Aisha, if I guess, so it's just a silly icebreaker question. I'm going to ask each person, favorite breakfast cereal?
Favorite breakfast cereal?
Yeah.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Good choice. All righty. Next, Morgan Johnson is the Vice President of Faculty Affairs at the University of Arizona Global Campus. In her role, she leads the university's Faculty Development and Support Team, Academic Operations Team, and Teaching and Learning Innovation Lab, which supports nearly 2,500 online faculty. Morgan is currently pursuing a PhD in organizational development and leadership. Her research focuses on teaching practices in online classrooms. As a passionate educator, Morgan has taught over 60 online courses during her career. Her research and consulting have focused on faculty management, teaching and learning, and academic operations. In addition to being part of the featured panel, Morgan has been active with ADEIL, helping host the ADEIL 2020 and 2021 conferences and being part of the awards committee for both of those years. Please join me in welcoming Morgan Johnson. And my silly question for you, Morgan, favorite breakfast cereal?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rich, for the invitation to participate today. I have to go with Aisha on this one. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, it's a favorite.
All righty. And then at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Greg Konop is an associate director within the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. The center is a new organization reporting to the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning with a focus on impacting the learning of all students and advancing the craft of teaching. Greg's most recent work prior to joining the center was acting as UW's COVID-19 Continuity of Instruction Instructor Support Lead. This was a position under the guidance of the Vice Provost for Instructional Continuity. In that role, Greg interacted frequently at the Vice Provost level, engaged regularly with the campus associate deans, and daily with approximately 75 instructional support resources drawn together from across UW's decentralized environment. This work was squarely in a mid-level leadership space, which is challenging and a rich learning experience. Most important to Greg, he was able to observe the power of partnerships, and collaboration. In 2021, Greg is able to bring some of the lessons he learned and relationships he built through the pandemic's continuity effort to leadership within the new Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. Please join me in welcoming Greg Konop. Favorite breakfast cereal, my good sir.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go with Frosted Flakes, Tony the Tiger, man.
They're great. I'm a Golden Grams man myself, but yeah, thank you very much. So really honored to have people from, again, different schools, different parts of the country. So first, a question I'd like to ask each of you. First, please describe what happened at your school during COVID. I'd be really interested to hear what sort of modality was most prevalent at your school prior to COVID, and then what happened when COVID hit.
Yeah, I'm happy to maybe start us off here because I think I'll be probably the unique school out of the three of us. So interestingly enough, we were online when COVID hit fully already. So our experience with the pandemic was very different than schools who had to quickly move faculty and students and courses online. We had our own unique challenges though. So it was interesting because I was in a session earlier today with some of our ADEIL presenters who were talking about really how this shift during the pandemic helped to democratize our classrooms. And I think that's what we saw in general as for both the faculty and student experience. Not that everyone was experiencing everything the same, but they were experiencing it at the same time. So we serve an adult population, high risk in many regards. And so COVID really had an impact on our students in terms of what they were experiencing outside of the classroom. And that manifested really in different ways inside the classroom. And also for our faculty, right? Faculty were also dealing with their own crisis at the same time. So I think for us as an institution, one of the things that happened during the pandemic is it really pulled student care front of mind and helped grow collaborations. And I think, Greg, your introduction perfectly said this, really grew collaborations and relationships that were critical for the success of our students. And so we saw, initiatives, new resources, and really support structures start to grow from the pandemic, again, that truly are student-centric. And just really quickly, I have to share kind of a funny, when the pandemic first hit, all of us are in our own ways working online professionals for years before the pandemic. I had a family member reach out and said, online, who knew? But I do think one of the things, right, for us as an institution that helped during the pandemic is we were like, we feel seen and heard. We've been working in online and distance education spaces for so long, and now colleagues and various institutions and networks are seeing the value that we've seen for all of these years. So.
All right, so I can go next. Before I begin, I would like to let you all know that I am a person who stutters. So you may hear some blocks and some repetition, but if you give it a minute, then you'll get used to it. All right, so at the University of South Carolina, we started discussing, just in case plans around March the 9th of last year. And around that same time, the president of the university announced that there were 2 confirmed COVID cases in the state of South Carolina and like 5 awaiting confirmation. And that we were basically, as a university, keeping an eye out. During this time, the students were on spring break, so they were not on campus. And during that time as well, the Center for Teaching Excellence, the CTE, we were hosting an in-person virtual teaching conference on campus. So most of the people who were scheduled to come to the event, they made it, but we did have a few cancellations because of the virus. On my team, the instructional design team at the CTE, we started looking at our processes because we had a feeling that the school was going to close. So different offices that would be impacted or that need to be in support roles, they started meeting. We started meeting to discuss we started meeting to discuss plans. We also had faculty who started to contact us for help because they probably knew that we were going to be shutting down. they needed help going remote. So on March the 11th, around that time, spring break was actually extended and faculty were asked to modify classes to go remote through April the 3rd. But as we know, that time frame was extended throughout the rest of the semester. But we had some great and awesome faculty from around campus that were skilled in teaching online, and they actually offered to help us to assist faculty to get ready, because most of the faculty at the University of South Carolina had never taught online before, and a lot of them didn't have an interest in teaching online. I did not have an interest in teaching online either. So the university started working on a Keep Teaching page that provides resources to faculty removing remote. And the coolest thing, one of the very surprising things is that this page was up in 2 days. Now, we never get anything done that quickly at the university, but in 2 days, we had this comprehensive Keep Teaching page that was utilized to help faculty. We actually started holding some in-person drop-in session in collaboration with some other units on campus to get prepared. But later, when the university closed, those moved to virtual, as well as all of our events went to virtual. We also had some different units contact us to speak with groups of faculty, so not just one-on-one, but speak to groups on faculty. And it was basically all hands on deck. But I have to say that the CTL, the CTE, we got new clientele during that time. Our numbers skyrocketed, and we were like the most sought after unit on campus. Well, us and Blackboard support. So we can share that glory with them. During this time, we also hired 2 part-time instructional designers to assist us. And as a result of COVID, we've installed cameras in all of our classes for students who wanted to attend classes online in the fall and spring semester. And those cameras are still being used today for students who are in quarantine. So that's what happened at the University of South Carolina in Columbia.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. As Rich introduced me before, Greg Konop, University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I could talk probably an entire day about what I'll call our continuity of instruction experience. I was kind of working through some notes earlier, and I chose to kind of boil this down into like a 3-part quick story about the work that we did. So I'm going to give you kind of 3 parts or 3 chapters. Chapter 1, I'm just going to call the people story or the collaboration story. So we went fully remote on March 13th. And that was a Friday, so Friday the 13th of 2020. And we, kind of had been talking about it for maybe centrally like a week or so ahead of time, but, there weren't any really like significant plans that had been put in place. So we did a really rapid shift. I think what happened on the 13th of Friday the 13th was there was an announcement that spring break was coming up, and we were going to take like an extra week off for the students, and then they'd have spring break. And when they came back, everything was going to be fully remote for students. So the work that I was asked to do from campus leadership was to see if I could organize some sort of a continuity of instruction response team. So this is kind of where the people come in. And the thing that I really, look back on and think was our energy is from the onset, kind of a message that I think we all shared and gravitated towards was doing our work with kind of 3 adjective types of words, right? Working with urgency, working with flexibility, and working with grace towards one another. And that word grace really stood up because what we were doing was bringing together about 125 different sort of instructional support people from some of the central units on campus and from the individuals out at the schools and colleges. And I would say that we had a history across those units of both working well in some cases and also running into a lot of kind of obstacles and boundaries of collaboration. And that word grace was really important because what we were really asking people to do is to set all that aside and to understand that we were going to step on one another's toes in this experience and things were going to be difficult, but let's, kind of approach things from that mindset. So we rallied together somewhere in the range of like 100 to 125 people from central units and from school and college units. And then part 2 of the story is we organized them into this structure that we called the continuity of instruction support structure, which was really having them work with the associate deans at the schools and colleges and making sure that every school or college had somebody that we called like a support lead or a batch lead, but then they also had kind of a small pool of other people that they could draw from that were also in the support structure. And within our large letters and science unit, we, kind of connected those more with groups of departments, but we got all these people deployed and made them available to work with instructors on what we called readiness, not online, right? We even kind of stayed away from the word quality a little bit, but we tried to get almost every course that we could into a state of readiness, which we had kind of a checklist for. And we actually tried to track all of those into a massive set of spreadsheets to create sort of a dashboard of where were we from a readiness standpoint to be able to report back to campus leadership on whether the students, when they came back, whether we would be ready for them. And our story was that we had about 8,000 courses become ready in about 2 weeks. I think we could debate that number, whether that's really the number or not, but that's kind of the number that we got to. Whatever it was an astronomical lift. But chapter 3 would be kind of, how did we actually do the work? Well, we did the work with urgency, we did the work with flexibility, and we were extremely graceful towards one another in the way that we did our work. That helped one another succeed. It helped the campus succeed. We crowdsourced solutions by using some of the technology that was available to us. And I think just offered one another a lot of encouragement to be able to do this really significant work that we did. And there wouldn't be the end, because I'm not sure that the end has hit yet, but that would be the spring 2020 story.
Well, something that isn't necessarily the end, but so we can reflect on, what are some of the positive and impactful things that happened? And again, I readily recognized this was a crazy time. This was stressful. This was hectic. There are lots of people who never want, I mean, it was a really tough experience. At the same point though, this year with ADEIL, we want to celebrate what everyone did. And I'm a big fan of silver linings anywhere we can find them. And I would just love to hear about any positive or impactful happens that happened in your communities that may not have happened otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
I don't
so I'll
mind.
go
Maybe,
first.
oh, go ahead, Aisha.
All right, so I'll talk about the positive impact and impactful outcomes at the University of South Carolina. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, put the CT on the map, the Center for Teaching Excellence, to put us on the map. So more people now know about us, and they also utilize our services. With the CTE, it also helped us to develop a hybrid approach for our programming. So in the past, 98% of our programming, whether that be workshops or presentations, various meetings, they were in person. But now we have a mix of in-person, hybrid, and online presentations. One interesting thing, though, is the ones that are hybrid, where people can attend online or in person, people are mostly attending those online. I think that this has also had a positive impact on the collaborations of offices on campuses. And we were collaborating with various offices before, but I think that those increased. And as I mentioned earlier, we got cameras installed in all of our classrooms. And also, many faculty were reluctant to teach online, but they've become more interested in the idea of teaching online now. And also say that many faculty and staff, they learn how to use new technologies. So I'll say that those are some of the positive things that have happened at USC.
Yeah, if I can go next, I would. So some of this is a little bit, sounds really familiar. I had kind of put in my notes here is we certainly elevated the value and the visibility of instructional design. I think pre-pandemic, we could kind of say like, oh, we've got resources that work with instructional design or instructional supports. And, it's kind of like, what is that? What do these people do? Well, people found out really quickly what it was that we do and really put us on a map in a really important way. Certainly new skills and understandings. I put Zoom pedagogy down kind of as I think about it, like Zoom was around kind of, but certainly like what we've learned that we can do with it and what instructors have learned that what they can do with it is really important. And then again, this is relationship type of stuff, but strengthened old relationships and created new ones, whether those are across organizations, whether they're new partnerships or they're just intrapersonal. Those would be three things I have.
Yeah, I think, Greg, to your point about developing new skills, one thing that we really embraced on our campus at University of Arizona Global Campus was use of technology to create virtual communities. So, and that goes for our faculty, students, and our staff. So we saw, significant increase in use of things like Teams, really to bring our teams together as we were all working remotely and trying to support faculty and students remotely. And that's something I think that was a culture shift that I don't think will go back, right? We're using tools, I think, more intelligently to connect and collaborate. So that's, I think, a great thing. I think I love this question too, Rich, because I was recently kind of talking with some colleagues about this idea that the pandemic was an obstacle, but really an obstacle as a way for significant change for institutions that really were having challenges making the jump to online. And while I think some are deciding to go take that back a little bit or approach it in a different way, I think we watched, for those of us who've worked online for some time, kind of the last 20 years go by in 18 months for many institutions and work out some of those pain points that otherwise would have taken years. So, I think I'm celebrating the fact, right, that we've dipped our toe in, right? And that's been a different experience, I think, for every university, and the path forward will look different as well. The other thing I just wanted to mention around this question that was kind of an interestingly happened during the pandemic due to organizational change my institution was going through is our budgeting process significantly changed. And I think we can all say that, like, finances were tight across, universities, and how we were spending, funding was critical, especially as we were looking at some of the new supports that we needed to have in place for students, faculty, and staff. But that also brought a lot of transparency to the budgeting process, where leaders could have open conversations about, are we spending our dollars in the best possible way? And how can we pool resources potentially across departments and units to make better decisions? And we saw this a lot around technology and cutting unnecessary use of tools and really coming around those like Zoom, Microsoft Teams that we knew could be used across campus.
So across institutions, I'm hearing either things that had to happen or just were silver linings, an increase in building connections, building rapport, understanding for what people are going through, grace, caring. And I'm also just reminded the idea of encouragement. Something I'm actually going to start by sharing my own story. But my next thing I'm going to ask you all is share a story of valuable encouragement you've received. And here I'm actually going to kind of refer back to my UW-Madison colleague, Greg Konop, and when we first met. So I had a chance to first meet Greg in March 2020. And it started, it was realization like, this COVID thing's like maybe kind of serious. Let's have some discussions. And the first discussions were, what if we had to move, let's say, our biggest lecture halls? What if they had to finish the semester online for like the last couple of weeks? And then a couple of days later, the thing was, yeah, we're moving everything. And it's all going to be remote online in, after spring break. And so Greg had mentioned, putting people in place to be support systems. And I remember I think it was a Thursday. Greg and I just ended up sitting next to each other at the meeting, and we're making small talk. And Greg says, Rich, I'm needing people who can be the contact person for departments, schools. You've had a thoughtful approach about the situation in our meetings. I think you do a good job. Would you be willing to do this? Like, well, yeah, I mean, like the ship's on fire. So like, of course I'm going to say yes, but it's one of those things that like, just that encouragement. And, it was, in everyone's situation, it was stressful work, but just to like think back as I was, checking my email or wondering what fires needed to be put out, just like, yeah, like that Greg guy who was talking to the vice provosts about his plan to like move all this stuff online and who's been coordinating all these 125 people. He said he thinks I do a good job. Like, yeah, we've got this. I've got this. So that was something that made a very positive impact for me going into challenging work, rewarding work, but work with challenges. So happy to share that.
Thanks. And maybe Rich, I'll just grab that one as kind of a baton since
Yeah,
my name was in your story. So
absolutely.
I do recall that conversation. It's interesting to think back and try to recall details from your own mind about the blur that was, I'm sure for every one of us, those kind of frantic days and starting to think about in support for the pandemic. And then you hear somebody say something, you're like, I do, I remember that conversation and the blur of how things happened. I have just a general theme that I do have a particular story in mind with this, but as we all know, like negative energy creates momentum. And the more you hear kind of negative kind of things or problems, the more it kind of builds momentum and builds energy. And I think the same thing happens, only we hear it less about positive energy and positive stories and positive encouragement. And one of the themes I have from the time during the pandemic is the number of people that's reached out to me, either through Microsoft Teams or through email, or people that had my phone number that would just say like, hey, you're doing a great job. I appreciate this or that type of thing. Like just a few words. And, it builds momentum, it builds energy. And a part of me fears that we lose some of that coming out of the pandemic and people kind of return a little bit more to a status quo of maybe not being quite so kind and encouraging to one another. So that stands out to me as something I'm trying in my new work to continue to be positive and encouraging to people. But then I also have just kind of what I think is a quick funny story to sort of reflect upon is we were probably 6 months into this work, right? Like I remember initially we got into doing this support work, and I think there was this false hope that, oh, we're going to do this through spring semester, and then everything's going to go back to normal, right? Well, it still hasn't gone back to normal, right? But it was probably August of 2020. I was doing a check-in with somebody who was a support lead at one of the schools and colleges. And this person had sort of reflected looking back and said, Greg, I really thought this entire thing was going to blow up in about like a week and a half to 2 weeks because of some of the history of kind of challenges of collaboration. And this person had said, the reason it didn't is because of how we rallied together and everybody kind of all hands on deck kind of spirit is what lifted people, which is again, just a reflection to me of the power of like people when they work together and when they can really just kind of let go of some of the baggage that sometimes gets in the way, which is again, right, about positive feedback. It's about momentum. It's about energy. I had that conversation that day in August of 2020 on a day when I was just beaten down and kind of was like, you know what, I just need to get away for a while. And that simple conversation and just reflecting upon why things worked the way they did just gave me energy for working through, the rest of that week. So that's a quick story from my side.
Greg, thanks for those comments. I think one of the common threads I hear between the three of us is that we all are in roles where we're supporting various groups, right? Faculty, staff, and students across campus. And so I think one of the challenging things, and it's almost like, Greg, to your point, that 6-month mark was so critical probably for everyone's institution, thinking, okay, fall semester might look a little bit different, or, we're going to go back to a more normal state. And it's almost like folks in our teams, right, these support centers, we're feeling the burnout then. So I think to your question, Rich, one of the, great points during the pandemic of encouragement was really hearing folks come together around each other and say, it's okay not to be okay. And I think a theme we heard from our faculty and staff really was that burnout piece. We had a great Center for Women's Leadership that really started to bloom during the pandemic and provide support to our entire university community, around self-care. So, they brought in speakers, they brought in individuals to really focus in on various topics like mindfulness, as well as just, general strategies for taking care of yourself during a time of crisis. And so I think that it was encouraging to see our community come together and really support each other. And for some of us, it was really positive sometimes. And, the momentum that you're hearing us all discuss was exciting. And for others, it was extremely stressful, a lot of change, and everyone kind of went back and forth. So I think that the ability to come together and just support one another during, this time has been really encouraging.
I would kind of say the same thing. I would say that the different people from different departments we're supporting each other. So even people within departments were supporting each other as well. So their faculty supporting their colleagues, and that was great. Especially those people who had experiences teaching online before. They were sharing that knowledge with other people in their college who was less experienced. I'd also say that we got valuable and encouraged. We got great feedback from faculty, all types of kudos and thank yous, my entire team. And one of the biggest, I would say, aspects of valuable encouragement was getting thank yous from the president of the university and the provost of the university and various faculty senate meetings. And even about 3 weeks ago, our provost thanked us again in the video that went out to the faculty of the university. So I can say before, at the beginning of the pandemic and up until now, we've been getting valuable encouragement from the university's leadership as well.
Oh, wonderful to hear. The next thing that I want to bring up, now this is a topic that is way bigger than we can fit into a single conversation. But I think there's been a lot of emphasis about how we can improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in all parts of our lives. I think with all the sheltering in place, there were injustices that, there might have been sports that might have potentially had a chance to overshadow it, and like there was no turning away from it. And it's very much been a big reminder of the work that needs to be done. And so I'm kind of curious what you would say of how we can improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in our classrooms, in the online classroom, in the in-person classroom, in the hybrid classroom, and what that might look like.
Yeah, well, I can speak for our campus really has looked at this in two different ways. Well, it's multifaceted, this topic in general, but when we get down to kind of the classroom experience, two different ways in really how we design courses and then how we deliver those courses. And so there was a group really of cross-functional faculty and staff that came together to develop a rubric that we use now to evaluate courses as they're being redeveloped or redesigned to look at DEI aspects of those courses. So it's truly a peer-to-peer review between faculty members that are providing feedback to course developers and the faculty subject matter experts at time of a redevelopment to look at, what maybe imagery are in the courses, what type of text or articles are being referenced, and really in general, how can they be improved and more inclusive, based on where the course currently is. And again, it's peer-to-peer, so the faculty who are reviewing go through kind of an internal training around the rubric and the purpose of this prior to going through that particular exercise. And then our faculty developers are able to take that feedback along with student feedback from previous course iterations and other faculty in their particular programs to make meaningful changes as they're redeveloping their course. So that's more on the design aspect, but then I think the delivery piece really was the immediate place that we focused a lot of our kind of time and attention and development of faculty during the pandemic. And in particular, this concept of civil discourse kind of came to the front of a lot of classroom discussions, and faculty were really reaching out for resources and just information about how do we effectively manage classroom discussions and providing students the freedom, to have conversations that need to happen. But we ourselves aren't necessarily DEI experts, so help us. So I think to Aisha's earlier comment, we stood up resources faster than we've probably ever stood up resources, and that since that time have been, multiple iterations, and we're leveraging experts and new resources coming out that external to the university to improve, but looked at having roundtables with our faculty. What are they experiencing in the classroom? Where are areas where they don't feel confident in necessarily having some of these conversations? And then, what does that look like in terms of some of our faculty who do have expertise based on their own experiences? So bringing those roundtables together, having some of those conversations, and then just generally, I think, reinforcing resources that were built out as faculty were teaching new courses throughout the semester. So that's kind of where we focus so far as a campus. We've also done a lot of work with our staff and faculty together. I won't go into as much detail there, but as I mentioned earlier, it is multifaceted. So I think, and different for every campus, right? Depending on the needs.
So I can talk about some of the things that we do in South Carolina. So I think that having more diversity, equity, and inclusion professional development opportunities for faculty and students is important. At the CTE, we have a Teaching Towards Inclusive Excellence. We call it TTIE certificate program, where we partner with our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So we offer various workshops and presentations in that certificate program on DEI top topics. So what we look to do is we continue to find a way to expose students and faculty to various diverse subjects, things like universal design for learning. We've had a session on considerations for students who stutter. We've had sessions on strategies for teaching first generation college students and more. So I had the coolest opportunity last week to assist in a DEI professional development opportunity at the Darla School of Business. The assistant dean for DEI in the school, she led a master's of human resources students through a variety of exercises, and I assisted with a virtual reality activity where students were able to select from two different apps to explore. One was called Home After War, where this app focused on individuals who came home from the war in Iraq. And we also had one called We Live Here, and this app allowed students to explore items from a person who was experiencing homelessness. And so after the students participated in these activities, they discussed their experiences with their classmates, and they mentioned that they learned quite a bit from these activities. So I think that improving DEI in our classrooms takes work, and that we all have to be committed to improvements in this area.
I've got just maybe two things I'll say quickly. One is I'm going to give a shot back out to Rich. I watched Rich's video that is posted within the conference for diversity, equity, inclusion, heavy metal, and education. And if you haven't watched it, I would encourage you to, because not only is it really informative, but it's just really well done and really well planned out. But a lot of what I think Rich's message in that presentation was around representation, and thinking about that within your curriculum, and not just kind of, taking the easy way towards showing subjects and historical figures that, have always been the ones that get used, but really being thoughtful towards that. But then a second thing I'll share is, so I think as Rich did the introductions, it was said that I'm part of a new center on the Madison campus called the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Mentoring. Our organization started on July 1st, so we are still finding our way with what our work is going to do. But some of the work that's happened in the teaching and learning support community in the past probably 5, 6, 7 years has been around working with some of the larger enrollment courses. And within those courses, the emphasis was really around active learning in these large courses that traditionally when you walked into are the courses where you sit down for 50 minutes and somebody lectures at you for 50 minutes. about math or about chemistry. Sometimes they're facing you, sometimes their back is towards the students. You know, you're all familiar with what that type of instruction looks like. But I think those are great opportunities for institutions to continue to work at, because I think active learning is certainly much more inclusive than passive learning just by its nature. So I think that's an opportunity that I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit, because it's really, really difficult work and it requires a lot of change management. But that's something that I've seen us make some headway with here at UW-Madison.
Oh. No, thank you all. Thanks, Greg, for the reference. Just for myself, so I had a chance to submit an e-poster. I connected to heavy metal, but I also, in my own, anytime I'm teaching like history of music, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, they're great. They're wonderful. We need to learn about them. There are composers, even from antiquity, who are, you know, of color, who are women composers, and we need to be acknowledging them too. So that's what what I'm trying to do in my own sphere. I had also another great e-poster that touches on this. Kimberly O'Brien's Equitable Language and Feedback. That has some great tangible ideas that I would encourage everybody to check out. And again, the e-posters, they're in the conference program on the ADEIL YouTube professional development page. Just some great ideas there. Thank you, as we all work to improve DEI in the areas that we have influence. So here's a question going back to more specifically online, and that's online sustainability. And Morgan's at UAGC, where everyone was already online. Aisha and Greg at institutions where it was a lot of in-person, perhaps predominantly in person, and then we had to move like that. And I'm curious what you see as the potential for online or remote or hybrid once we're not in a pandemic, what that might look like.
Well, I don't mind leading into this one, and I will say this conversation, being completely frank, causes me a little bit of tension. And when I say the next thing, you'll understand where that tension comes from. Is University of Wisconsin-Madison is historically a residential institution, and I want to say I speak as institutional leadership, aspire to remain a tremendous residential institution. And part of the language here in fall semester is to reunite in a physical space, right? To get people back. So there's, I think, very much this tension between let's continue to do what we've always done residentially, because it's been this rich, rewarding experience. So the tension with that obviously is, as somebody who works in an instructional design type of space, you see that there's opportunities to do other types of things. And I'll also perhaps say, as the father of 2 college students, I also can talk with my daughters who are in college and hear them talk about just even the sort of the advantages as a learner to have some flexibility and diversity in the type of courses that you have. And just even one really concrete type of thing is, my younger daughter is a freshman at the University of Minnesota, another large campus, and she was just talking about the pressure of being from one physical class to the next physical class to the next physical class in kind of walking distance, and the ability to have some variety of course types that might actually allow her to be a little bit less stressed and be able to take in information and have kind of this blend of kind of modality of courses rather than kind of all in one suite. So I kind of listen to that, and that's where I feel a little bit of kind of tension and hope that where our growth becomes at these large residential campuses is towards a little bit of a more mixed portfolio over time, for the advantages of students, for the advantages of inclusivity, equity. That's kind of where my mind settles into this question.
Yeah, Greg, I think that we're in the same boat. The University of South Carolina is a residential school mainly, and I believe that's how how the leadership wants it to stay. But I remember maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, our goal was to have at least 20% of online. Was to have students to be able to take at least 20% of their classes online, which is basically one class online. So I think we may be I'm hopeful that we'll increase that a little bit more because I do think that some students would like to take more online courses. They might, maybe not all online courses, but they may want to take a few. And I think that the type of programs that appeal to working adults will continue to stay online. Those programs like education, nursing, information technology, organizational leadership, I think that those courses will continue to stay online. Within the university, within the University of South Carolina's portfolio, we have regional campuses that we call Palmetto College campuses. And students can take 2 years at those campuses and then move into a 4-year program. But we do also have a program called Palmetto College for students who are degree seeking. So they may have 2 years already, and then they'll take the final 2 years online. So I can maybe see us having some additional programs, some additional degree completion programs for our students.
Yeah, I am, thanks Rich, in a different boat, I think, than Greg and Aisha, but I will say one piece that we're starting to see as we are hiring roles are individuals coming from institutions that are making the decision to go back, both as a residential institution, but also bringing all of their staff and employees back. And I think and I think this is what Felicia is mentioning in the chat, as folks are experiencing remote work as an employee, especially for those who are working in online programs, that's become an attractive full-time or at least hybrid offering. So we are seeing folks come from institutions stating that they would either like to stay full-time remote, or their institution is no longer offering online programs, and they see that as a critical part of the program portfolio for any really higher ed offering right now. So that's an interesting piece that we've seen recently. The other thing I'll just add on a personal note is, you know, I have 3 children in K through 12 right now, and they all experienced some level of online and remote and distance ed over the last 2 years. I think this is going to be an expectation for our future learners, is some level of offerings. Maybe it's not the full classroom experience, but at least services for students. So I do think institutions have to think about beyond kind of, right, the students that we have now, what should we expect in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thanks for sharing those perspectives. Time is admittedly kind of fleeting, so we have at least time for one more. And this one I'm going to leave a little bit more open-ended. What potential do you see for higher education? It could be higher education in general. It could be at your own institution 5 to 10 years from now. Is this with online and hybrid? Is it perhaps with alternative credentials or online stackable credential certificates? Is it something altogether different? I'm curious to hear what you think.
All right, I can go first. I think that more schools will have an online presence. I see the interest now with schools in schools in South Carolina. I think 5 to 10 years from now, those programs will be booming. Another potential is for students at traditional 4-year brick and mortar schools to graduate quicker with more flexible course schedules, like having more 8-week courses, more 4-week courses, more 3-week courses. Some students want to get in and out, and which some may want to stay 4+ years, but some students may want to get through more quickly. I also think that virtual reality will be more mainstream 5 to 10 years from now. I can see over the last 3 years or so that it's been more requested at the University of South Carolina. So I think 5 to 10 years from now, virtual reality will be an integral part of higher education.
Yeah, Aisha, I want to just make note of your point around students expecting time to degree completion to be faster. And really that's, you know, where I've been thinking around this question is, you know, we're seeing, right, lots of industry specific organizations coming to partner with higher ed institutions in recent years. I think the most, right, like some of the larger partnerships recently, around like the Amazon commitment to their employees for higher ed, as well as organizations, like Starbucks and Walmart that have already done this and moved in this direction. But I think it's the partnering of both traditional and non-traditional credentials with higher institutions and industry leaders to ensure that students have a pathway forward. And that probably will look a lot different than it does today. I think one area, right, where we've done a lot of exploration is around prior learning assessment to ensure that, those non-traditional kind of learning experiences are being factored into a student's degree progression. But I think that's only going to continue to grow. So that's one piece. And then the other piece I think is this idea of kind of 24/7 support for students and ensuring that student experience is meeting students at the point in which they need it to. I think during the pandemic, we saw lots of institutions start to partner with vendors, right? Because faculty and staff can't be around the clock available necessarily to students, or at least at the scale at which students need. So, I think we've seen some very cool new vendors come into the market recently around supporting student mental health and being kind of a 24/7, general wellness support for students, as well as more academic supports like tutoring that we've seen grow over the last couple of years in terms of having that available to students as they're working on their schoolwork and really need assistance from someone else. And, I think those types of student experiences we're going to continue to see grow.
Thanks. I'll be really quick here. I think I'll go back. We've talked in a number of questions about diversity, equity, inclusivity, right? So that's obviously an area that has, if we're 5 or 10 years from now and we're still behaving the same way that we are now in some of those regards, we'll really have missed the mark. So that's an area obviously of great opportunity to be able to help from a teaching and learning standpoint to understand more what some of the different strategies and approaches are, and to build our institutions into much better places, much more welcoming places to all students.
Last thing I'll leave you with. Again, we celebrate distance education. We recognize that was really different for a lot of people. Also, just realizing that there's a lot going on. We live in a changing world. And just if each of you could just kind of give maybe just some sort of statement, just acknowledging just change, good, bad. Everyone's been through a lot, but also just the potential of that we can make in higher education. If you just want to give a closing thought on that regard.
Yeah, I feel like I want to jump on that one right off the bat and just say, like, I'll go back to, I was talking earlier about kind of positive energy and momentum, and recognizing that there are so many people who are still struggling through the change after change after change after change that has happened. And if you have any energy that you can find to reach out and support somebody else who's either dealing with some difficult times, or whatever way you can offer positive energy to somebody else, whether it's just a thank you or an appreciation or writing somebody a note or any of those types of things, really does a lot of good. And just if it lifts people's energy for a half a day, it's well worth your time investment to do some of those things that might be kind of small to do but have great impact.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add is, Rich, I mentioned when I said it earlier, I love the theme of this year's conference in terms of celebrating. So I think, we all should go back and celebrate with our teams and communities that have been through so much and have done so much good work in such a short amount of time. Oftentimes I think we don't take time for celebrations. So hopefully, as I know fall semester is just geared up, but as we get closer to the end of fall semester, everyone can kind of take a pause and just celebrate the communities that they work within.
I think Morgan and Greg just basically summed it up. We must acknowledge change. We've all been through a lot. This is just the beginning of change in higher education. There is more change to come. And the phrase that we've been hearing throughout the pandemic, we are all in this together.
Well, thank you very much. At that point, I'm just kind of going to wrap things up. Again, what a privilege to chat with three individuals, definitely in positions of influence at three different institutions from different parts of the country, but all making a really, really positive impact for teachers and learners. So please join me again in thanking our featured panel, Aisha Haynes, Morgan Johnson, Greg Konop. Thank you very much. Just a little bit of housekeeping on my end. So this wraps up day 2 of ADEIL's 3-day conference. We've got more exciting things happening tomorrow, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern. We have our annual business meeting for ADEIL members, just to kind of go over some ADEIL business. Then we have 2 hours worth of presentations. We have another hour of informal roundtables. Just an opportunity to be in a situation that's maybe a little less structured and just kind of connect with each other. Again, in the online space, how do we recreate that just meeting up with people you just met at a conference and sitting at a table and just sharing ideas? That's our goal with these. Then we have our closing session at 3 p.m. See who's going to be on next year's board, find out who won the ADEIL course awards, and which is also my plug for our asynchronous opportunities. Again, we've had a chance to talk about our e-posters. We also have a phenomenal course showcase of 8 courses where faculty and academic staff give you the tour, the greatest hits of their courses. So exciting things to take off. And for if you'd like to weigh in on who you think should win this year's Conference Choice Award, well, you have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern tonight to vote for that. Again, all those links are in the conference program. Thank you all so very much, and looking forward to tomorrow and continuing to celebrate distance education with everybody. Thank you all very much.